Japan does not have to announce a crisis to move United States markets. It only has to change the price of money. What looks like a political story is really a funding story, and funding is what drives positioning. Our strategy begins with one principle: mechanisms over narratives. When the cost of capital shifts in one major economy, global portfolios must adjust, even if no one rings a bell. For decades, Japan anchored global liquidity through extremely low interest rates. That allowed investors to borrow in yen at very low cost, convert into dollars, and purchase higher-yielding United States assets. This is the carry trade. It works as long as the spread between funding costs and asset returns remains wide enough to compensate for risk and hedging. But when Japanese yields rise, that spread compresses. The trade does not need to collapse to matter. It only needs to become less attractive. At the margin, there are two transmission channels we are watching. First is the private carry unwind. If Japanese funding is no longer effectively free, leveraged exposure to duration-sensitive equities and credit becomes less compelling. Second is the sovereign balance sheet channel. Japan holds a significant stockpile of foreign reserves. Even the perception of reduced incremental demand for United States Treasuries can affect term premium. We do not need forced selling to see pressure. We only need the marginal buyer to hesitate. As of February 2026, we map this as late Phase 1 pressure. Markets can remain resilient while fragility builds underneath. We assign roughly 60% probability that late Phase 1 conditions persist into mid-2026. We assign roughly 30% probability that Phase 2 style volatility emerges by year-end, driven by funding mechanics rather than headlines. And we assign roughly 20% probability that a policy-dominant Phase 3 develops into mid-2027, conditional on disorderly credit stress. These are probability bands, not predictions. If this framework helps you see markets through structure instead of emotion, consider subscribing. Our goal is to consistently translate macro mechanics into phase sequencing so you can better understand what is driving risk, what is noise, and what signals actually matter. Here is what confirms transmission. Japanese long yields remain elevated or continue rising. The yen strengthens in a sustained way, suggesting repatriation. United States long-term yields remain sticky, even if growth softens, indicating rising term premium. Credit spreads begin to widen alongside tighter financial conditions. Invalidation looks different. Japanese yields stabilize. The yen weakens again. United States auctions clear cleanly, and term premium compresses. Credit markets remain orderly. We are not fighting headlines. We are tracking plumbing. When funding costs change, leverage changes. When leverage changes, correlations rise. And when correlations rise, optionality becomes valuable. This content is for educational purposes only and reflects a probability-based framework, not investment advice.